My guest is John Lee, the Vice President of Cloud Solutions at Carahsoft. John, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Absolutely.
We've had a really interesting day at the inaugural StateRAMP Summit. We've heard a lot about cyber harmonization. We've heard a lot about StateRAMP and the value it brings. From Carahsoft's perspective, what kind of value are you seeing? Basically, we know why people should use StateRAMP, but let's get to the deeper why you should use the StateRAMP.
Sure. So, from Carahsoft perspective, StateRAMP, FedRAMP, these FedRAMP, these RAMP type of frameworks and that, we're a big believer into it. We believe that from a government, the taxpayer's perspective, it's very important that that our cloud service providers, our vendors, take this initiative with their SaaS solutions, with their IaaS and PaaS, and actually achieve that ATO and that. We believe that it's one of the best IT programs that from a security perspective, from a cost perspective, it sort of helped the agencies actually meet their mission in that. So we've been spending a lot of time with our different vendors and sort of educating them on what is the process of actually working with an ATO enablers, what's the quickest and best way as far as the various platforms that we support, and actually to achieve that as quickly as possible so that, now that it's law, I mean, we spend a lot of investment into to help finally get that passed through and that, Congressman Connolly, and, that's done. Now we're on to what's the next roadblock, so we're, as Craig Abod would say, we're all in.
And I think there's a lot of what I've heard today and what I hear about FedRAMP more specifically is the value of having that baseline standard, that idea that, okay, we're all going to start at a bottom and then we can work up. Is when you talk to vendors, do they appreciate the fact that, like, okay, now I have at least the minimum what I need to meet versus, well, for you I need to meet this, and for Jason I need to meet that, and that's a pain in my rear end.
Sure. So what's interesting is we probably have 4 to 5 conversations with different potential ISVs or ISVs themselves each week, helping them as far as, map out why, getting to their board or getting to, talking with their technical folks of how to actually, to achieve that ATO, which groups should they be talking to as far as looking at solutions to help them the quickest, fastest, and most cost-effective way as possible. But vendors, from a vendor's perspective, we've seen that once they achieve their ATO, they're seeing a 60% increase in their revenue dealing with the public sector in that first year. So besides being the law on that, now we're actually seeing where the government agencies are actually reaching out, looking for these ATO-enabled type of solutions. And here at state, with the StateRAMP folks, they've done some very smart things in my book. One of the smart things I think they've done is where you do need to get an agency say, yes, I do want, I will sponsor it, but it's not like they have to spend as much money as on the FedRAMP side to actually for this continuous monitoring. The StateRAMP program office actually steps in there and helps them get that first ATO in place and making sure they meet the requirements, those security controls across the board. And then when it goes to the state of, let's say Arizona and they know that the StateRAMP program office has done that review, then they'll review the package and actually sign. So I think that is, what's interesting is I think StateRAMP took some of the history of the last, 13 years that we've been doing FedRAMP, back when GSA started with that, infrastructure as a service, BPA. A lot of companies have come and go. A lot of investment we've learned a lot. And I think StateRAMP took those lessons learned, and then they've improved upon it. And now we're sort of in this process of the different folks from StateRAMP, from FedRAMP, from DoD impact level office, from CISOs, and go down to all the different frameworks. I think they're starting to learn from each other and starting to harmonize their different security controls of how can we benefit as far as, people who have ATOs in those different frameworks so that they can move quicker and faster in these other frameworks.
All right, John, you hit a bunch of topics there, so I'm going to bring you back on one. That 60% number, 60% revenue in public sector. I mentioned that's both state, local, and federal. This is not just one or the other.
Correct.
That's an incredible. I mean, do you get a sense that's because once you get that good seal of approval, you're able to kind of market against that and people trust you? Why do you think that number is so high? I'm surprised by 60%, to be honest.
Oh, really? So clearly government agencies, the procurement officials and that clearly feel more comfortable when they look at somebody who has achieved that ATO across the board. I think everybody with all the some of the hacks that are, the attacks that are occurring and that, people are looking at this and saying, all right, like you said, good house seal approval that, I know that, nobody's going to yell at me if I actually utilizing somebody with an ATO in place and that. So I think the fact that like FedRAMP and some of these other ones are actually law, clearly it is pushing people where they're looking for that sort of like ATO solution in there and that. So I think that's what's driving. And then quite honestly, once you have that, that's a great message to go out and sell and market. And, that's what Caresoft does. I mean,
exactly.
We'll go out and make sure that they get that put in there.
And because there's requirements on the federal side from Office of Management Budget says your cloud services must meet the FedRAMP requirements. And then I'm sure a lot of states are really taking this much more seriously. That's a great way. That's a great kind of like highlight that you're finding. You dug into the detail. You dug into the data more. Let's jump through that because I'd love to hear some more. What else did you find about the impact of these RAMP type FedRAMP, StateRAMP programs?
Sure. So what we saw is we took 20 states that have been involved with StateRAMP, state and local governments and that. And we saw like a 30% increase in the last 5 years alone, where they've gone from just over $2 billion to almost $3 billion as far as their usage. Yeah, they're expecting another 12% increase over the next year to get them up to about over $3 billion. 3.21 billion, and this is all based on the GovWin data that we dove into. The other side is, looking at our own data, we saw that from 22 to 23 for all the public sector, both federal, state, and local governments, we saw a 26% increase in our own buys from over $8 billion to $10 billion. As far as people going out and buying cloud services. So I think what we're seeing now is that clearly the government agencies are out there looking for those those ATO solutions, StateRAMP and FedRAMP and DoD impact level, whatever level they're looking for. And I think they're starting to drive in utilizing that and also utilizing solutions that help them as far as meeting the NIST standards. On-prem, private clouds too.
That's incredible numbers. A 26% increase in spending on these ATO cloud services, over $10 billion. Now, part of that, of course, is the pandemic drove a lot of move to the cloud, IT modernization. But I think that made it easier because I know I could trust that cloud service because it's gone through again, minimum set of standards and it has that good seal of approval. What else do you think is driving some of that spend? Is it just beyond the fact you get ATO? Because it doesn't matter if you get bad. We've all bought the lemon car. How about that?
Sure, but you look at it from a security perspective. It's secure. It's reliable. It's gone through. It's today what you have is no longer what many years ago, where you got your ATO, 3-5 years later, you come back and you did your review. Well, this is a monthly where you're doing continuous monitoring. So this is not your grandfather's ATO anymore. It's totally different from that perspective that, if I was a procurement person, I know that I'm spending my money and I'm buying a secure solution for that taxpayer money and providing that type of solution that safeguarding their data, which is, part of the mission.
Which is a big part of the mission these days when it comes to driving services to citizens, improving services,
exactly.
The data roles. You also mentioned cyber harmonization. It's been a big theme here at the inaugural StateRAMP Summit. From your perspective and as you deal with your clients, what is driving, why is cyber harmonization more important today than maybe ever?
Well, you look at the state government. I think that we saw a presentation of, was it like 12 different standardizations that you have that inside the state? You have CISOs, you also have IRS has their own, and CMS has their own. And you can just go down through a whole list of different standardizations that these state government organizations have to support. Was it over, I think the number was over 50% of a CIO's time and energy is actually supporting these audits that are occurring. Today I have the CISO's office, they're in there, 20, 30 people doing an audit, and then they follow up with another, a different team from IRS or a different team. I mean, it's just, it's really time consuming. So I think the fact that you have there where they're saying, hey, is there a way that we can combine a lot of those security controls are overlapping. So is there a way that we can work better, faster, or be able to accept somebody who's already, reciprocate or recognize the ATO that another group has already done? So start there and then focus on that additional 20% that's outside of that area. So you have the StateRAMP program office here, you have different groups. And I think the StateRAMP and CISOs, they're actually working with each other and actually trying to come up with ways to help speed up the process and maybe help eliminate some of that additional, reviewing what's already been reviewed.
I talked to Nick Leisterson from the White House, and one of the things when we talked about cyber harmonization is this idea of trying to lower costs as well.
Right.
Is that something that you hear from industry that, no one ever wants to tell you they're going to lower their costs, but the cost of meeting HIPAA and cost of meeting CISOs and the cost of meeting FedRAMP and the cost of meeting StateRAMP and the cost of, that gets passed to the customer. And if they could somehow harmonize, I'm not sure the cost would ever come down, but they're not going to go up. How about that?
When you have a small ISV who's just getting into the industry and they're looking at which standard do they have to meet and that, across the board and that, they have limited resources. So we want to use all that emerging technology, especially with AI coming on board and how that's impacting of all these different SaaS solutions and that. But, any way that that we can attack or that we can figure out ways of reducing the cost and that, I think will have a tremendous impact as far as, getting more cloud service offerings. I mean, that's the one thing I've seen people who say, hey, there's going to be 10,000 cloud service offerings, right? Well, how many cloud service offerings are there right now? There's 91 in StateRAMP, and then there's like 300 in FedRAMP. Our biggest challenge now is how do we get things done quicker, faster with all these different cloud service offerings across the board and that. So
the other piece of this is we see this very much in the federal world, but I'm sure it's the same in the state. They are looking for those innovative companies.
Right.
And if those innovative companies have trouble or don't have an easy path to bring, hey, John, I have this great thing. Look at my new widget. What do you think? They're not going to go into the public sector, and the public sector will miss out on potential new capabilities. You mentioned AI, of course, and that's a
Sure.
good example. The other piece that you mentioned just briefly, and let me tag back to it, is this idea of what StateRAMP is doing around getting more cloud providers through the process. There's a fast track process. So
Right.
I think I learned about this just now about if you've been through FedRAMP already, you can get through StateRAMP much quicker. That must excite a lot of your
Sure.
your
So
partners.
in those conversations that we have, and again, was it 73% of all the StateRAMP cloud service offerings are, we work with them. Over 60% in the FedRAMP side, we work with those guys. So, our continuous conversations with them is to say, hey, you already have this. Now let's look at it to state and local. And within weeks, we can help, they can help go through that process of getting that particular StateRAMP ATO in place and that. So, we're excited about that. We see that, the various program offices are actually starting to talk more and more to each other and that. And like I said, what I'm excited and really bullish about, we have learned a lot There's a lot of people say, hey, there's these challenges. Yeah, there are challenges, but there are a lot of good government folks, the ones that wear the white hats, that they're leaning into these challenges. And that, I heard the federal CIO and her office from OMB, and they're talking about, some of the ways that they're looking to improve the process and make things quicker and faster and that. So, we're all in.
Yeah,
We're all in.
I've been doing a lot of coverage of FedRAMP recently, and I know the same thing. I give them a lot of credit for asking questions and trying to get better,
Yes.
figure out how to speed up. It's never as fast as we want, right?
No.
It takes time. It is government, and I'm sure StateRAMP has the similar problems. John, in the minute or so we have together left, I want to give you the opportunity to talk directly to the vendors, whether you support them or not, and as well as the government folks who are using the StateRAMP. What's your message to both of them around not just that StateRAMP's important and it makes things better, but what do they need to keep in mind as they're continuing down this path of IT modernization?
Well, we look at it this way. From our perspective, if you want to be in the public sector market, in a year, if not 2 years from now or something, if you don't have an ATO, you're not going to be in this business. Don't waste your money. Focus on the commercial side. But even with the commercial side, we're now noticing a lot of key infrastructure folks are looking at and saying, hey, do you have that FedRAMP solution? Or better yet, you got things like CMMC and things that are popping up. So think FedRAMP is just beyond just, the federal and the state and local government, but it's actually these corporations that are looking to help. If I can go and I can actually buy a solution that has a StateRAMP or a FedRAMP ATO on that, it helps them, that check mark with CMMC and some of these other areas. These ramps for commercial is a huge market for folks to join. So if you want to go after this market, or if you're a integrator or a contractor, that utilizing these types of solutions is just as important.
And the key word that you didn't quite get to, but that's where you're heading, is the reciprocity, and that's why the harmonization is so important. You mentioned CMMC. We could spend a whole lot of time on CMMC. That is coming, and I know there's already some discussion about how can we do some overlays or understand the coordination between FedRAMP, CMMC, and even an ISO standard. So I think people are listening to the frustration that's been growing.
You bring up a very interesting point. The CIOs and the CISOs at these agencies starting to accept what other agencies have already done, so that you do it once, you use it many times. I think those agencies are getting better in doing that versus having all those unique additional security controls on top. We still have some challenges there, but
you heard Nick from the White House talk about that in terms of let's find the enterprise
right
in the critical infrastructure that we're all using, and then hey, if you're in nuclear, if I'm in water, we maybe have 20% or so,
right.
But that 80% is probably the same.
Right.
John, I very much enjoyed our conversation. We're out of time for today, so let me thank my guest. John Lee's the Vice President of Cloud Solutions at Carahsoft. John, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.